So I'm not really sure when I missed like the rock, paper, scissors to get in the lineup, because apparently I lost and I got to go after everybody else. And so, you know, being an entrepreneur too, I decided I wasn't going to title my talk, so that way I could change things while I was listening to everybody else. So we're just going to do this and see kind of what happens, and you know, when we run out of time. So, you know, what I wanted to talk to you about today was about innovation and failure. And so one of the things that obviously you think about a lot when you're thinking about innovation is how many of you are there out there? And there's actually a lot more than you think. The thing that everybody, you know, whenever you talk about how many people there are out there, you've always got to talk about China and India, right? So looking at how many people there are in these two countries, there's essentially 8 people in those countries for each one of you. That's your competition right there. Those are the people that we need to think about, and me as an entrepreneur, I think about when I'm trying to do things that are innovative. But expanding that even further, if we look at the world overall, outside of the US, there's 21 people out there for each one of you. You might sit in class and you might think, you know, the people in your class are the competition for that job or whatever you're doing. It's actually a lot more than that. And I forgot to ask, show of hands real quick, who's a student here? Yeah, there's a lot of you. But there's a lot more than just those in this room that you're competing against. And this is not the ancient theorem. Ken's already gone. That joke is not useful. He's gone. These are the kinds of things that your competition are thinking about and learning. This is actually from a Chinese thesis paper 10, 15 years ago. To me, I was an electrical engineer. I can't make heads or tails out of this anymore. It's been too many years since I was in school. Maybe some of you can make heads or tails of it, but probably nobody can. No, yeah, nobody's shaking their head yes. But that's okay. That's okay. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we live for change. We do a lot of things here about change and thinking about change and innovating. And we're going to talk about some of the things and why that is here in the US. So let's talk about the revolution. Yeah, our history goes back that far. Yeah, it's not that far when you're coming from other countries. But our history of innovation goes back that far. Let's think about this. In a country when we were 2.8 million people, half the size of Atlanta, all these people went off to war. At the end of the war, 50,000 people were either killed or injured. 1 out of every 112 people were impacted by the Revolutionary War. And why did they do it? Because they were looking for something better. They wanted a change. They wanted something better for themselves and for the people that were coming after them. Let's think about the pioneers. Let's pack up all our stuff. Let's stick it into a wagon. Let's go across the country. It doesn't take 5 hours to get there. It takes 4 to 6 months to get to the other side of the country. 500,000 people did this journey. 10% of them died on the way. And even though they knew that, they still kept doing it. They still kept going all across the country, looking for a better opportunity, looking for a change, looking to innovate. The assembly line. One of the great stories, I think, of innovation. We've had challenges in the automotive industry, but looking back at what Henry Ford did with his plant, he went from 12.5 hours of building a car to an hour and a half. That had a phenomenal impact on this country in terms of being able to get these cars into everybody's home. And the one great story, I think, actually about Henry Ford and this innovation of the assembly line that I really love, especially in our times now, is that when he came up with this innovation, other people started copying that same innovation. And more importantly, his competitors, other car companies, started copying this innovation. So he had the opportunity to sue all of these folks. But instead of suing, what he decided was that it was more important to expand and grow this fledgling industry, and so he didn't sue. He let his competitors copy the innovation that he had created that made him successful. It's really interesting because nowadays we see so many companies sue as kind of their first line of defense. You've copied my innovation, I'm going to sue you. That's not what he did. They became successful, so there is clearly another way. The space race. What another great point in our time of innovation that we've created. Apollo 11, getting a man on the moon for the first time. But stepping back from that even just a little bit, on Apollo 1, if you know your history a little bit, we lost all 3 astronauts when they were still on the launch pad because of a fire. And after Apollo 11, we've probably seen the movie, right? Apollo 13, almost didn't get to the moon. They were able to recover them, come back, and yet we still continue to do all of these things. And very fortunately, they did come back on Apollo 13 because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to send Tom Hanks to an island and talk to a, volleyball and all those kinds of things. So that is how it went, right? Pretty sure that's true. And these 2 guys, does anybody know who they are? Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn. They were the 2 guys that invented TCP/IP. These 2 guys are part of the reason why you've got internet access. A lot of you are probably sitting here with access to the internet. It's interesting, earlier today we were talking about Al Gore and how he said he invented the internet. And funny is that Vint Cerf actually wrote a letter about Al Gore's impact on developing the internet. Apparently he never did say that. That was just kind of a story made up. But Vint Cerf did say that he was so supportive that the internet really developed the way that it did because of Al Gore's support when he was a politician. The other great thing that obviously this has done is that now all of us can receive emails about helping some widow in some other foreign country get money out. I've gotten a lot of those, and I'm just waiting for my check. I don't know about you guys. So what should you do? We have a lot of people that have created innovative things. Maybe they're aberrations. Maybe they were just lucky. I'm not sure I believe that, though. Let's talk about this guy. Does anybody know who he is? Some people actually know. Thomas Edison. Inventor, probably one of the greatest American inventors. Over 1,000 patents to his name. 1,093 patents, to be exact. And many more internationally. Now, of course, we know Edison for one thing, right? We know him for the light bulb. But what people don't think about is all the effort and energy that it took to get into the point of building a successful light bulb. A light bulb that now we take as commonplace. He didn't do it on the first try. It took effort, it took perseverance, and it took a lot of failure. So let's talk about that. Failure. Today is actually a pretty interesting day when I was building up this slide deck and thinking about this talk, especially being here at Emory. As you probably know, the history of Emory is very intertwined with Coca-Cola Company. Right? 26 years ago today was actually the introduction of New Coke. And I think we can all say that was a pretty spectacular failure. 77 days from when it was introduced, it was pulled off the shelves. But in hindsight, looking back to that failure, you can see that the Coca-Cola Company actually had a resurgence because of this introduction of New Coke. That's a great failure. And looking back to Apollo 13, which we just talked about, NASA called Apollo 13 a successful failure. And I'd say New Coke was probably a successful failure as well. It revitalized the country, got people interested in drinking Coke again. They started regaining market share as well. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories from my past as an entrepreneur as well. So in 1999, I started up this company called Digital Envoy. And some of you are going to be upset with me about Digital Envoy in just a minute once I tell you what it is. I came up with the idea of doing IP-based location. So when you go on the internet now, you see those ads based on where you're located. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. When you go to Netflix and you can't get streaming stuff because you're not in the US, yeah, sorry about that. It affects me too. So that's the technology I came up with in '99. So we started the company and we raised a little bit of money, about $1.5 million at the end of '99, beginning of 2000. And we found out about a competitor. The competitor was out on the West Coast, had raised $10 million. $10 million to our $1.5 million. These were people that had already started a company before, internet company. They'd successfully exited. So we decided, you know what, we should talk to these guys because, we're clearly outgunned. Maybe we should do something with them. So the CTO comes to Atlanta, comes swaggering in. We do the meeting on a Saturday, so none of the employees know about the meeting. Comes in, says, you know what? We just raised $10 million on a $50 million pre-money valuation. We're going to raise 50 on a 250. So you either come with us, join us, or we're going to crush you. It's basically the gist of the meeting. So he leaves. Me and my two other co-founders, we sit down, kind of scratch our heads. You know, I don't know. These guys have done it before. Maybe it's a smart thing to hitch our wagon to that. We go back and forth for a while and eventually decide, you know, we're going to go on our own. And we decide to just do what we're doing and just beat them down. And back then, you know, if you know the song, CeeLo Green's "Forget You," there's a non-radio version. That's kind of what we were thinking. And so we moved forward. And later that year, in 2000, we started fundraising again. We were looking to raise $3 to $5 million. And so we get to this point where we've signed a term sheet with somebody. So when you're an entrepreneur, you've signed a term sheet. What happens is, in this dance, you're not allowed to talk to any other investors. Right? So you sign this term sheet, and then about a month and a half into due diligence, this venture capital firm calls us up and says, so here's the thing. We didn't find anything wrong with you guys. We don't have any money. So we're not going to be able to do this investment. Now the problem here is that all the other investors that we talked to at this point, we told them, we're done. We signed a term sheet. And now to go back to them and say, we're actually not done. We need to try this again. They're all going to think that there was something wrong with us. And that's exactly the decision that we had to make. And it was a pretty easy decision for us. We had 15 employees at that point. They were all reliant on us to pay the bills, to pay their mortgages, to have health care, do all those things that people expect you to do. So we moped around for probably, I don't know, 45 minutes and said, let's get back to it. And so we did. We got back to it. And after 10 months of pitching, all told, from when we started, and pitching to over 200 VCs over that 10 months, we closed a $10.5 million round of funding. And we did that just a few months before 9/11. And so we were extremely lucky. Because after 9/11, here in Atlanta, nobody got funded for about 9 months. So there's definitely an element of luck to this. But there's also an element of being willing to fail. Because had we not accepted the possibility that we'd fail in doing this, but we were going to try our damnedest to make sure that we didn't fail, we wouldn't have accomplished any of this stuff. Fast forward in the story, 2007, the company's been acquired. I haven't been there for quite some time now, 6 years at this point. But the company continues on, and it, you know, stymies all of us that try to watch Hulu and Netflix and things like that outside of the country. And so these are some of the kind of things that you can do when you're willing to fail and you're willing to persevere. A little while ago, we actually saw a clip of this movie. If you've seen the movie Up by Disney, this is actually not from the movie. This is actually from a show that's coming out, I think, this fall from the National Geographic Channel. That's a real house with people inside of it because they wanted to see if they could do the same thing that you saw in the movie. They were willing to fail, clearly. And some of them were willing to risk their lives, too. I don't know if I would have signed up for that job. But these are the amazing things that you can do if you're willing to fail. So the thing I'll leave you with is, when you're thinking about the things that you're trying to accomplish, are you trying to do just the easy things so you know you'll succeed? Or are you doing the things that you might fail at? Because you're going to learn a lot more from those failures than you will from the successes. And if you ever think that the failure is too risky, I challenge you to think about the 56 guys that signed the Declaration of Independence. Because had they failed, they would have been caught, tried for treason, and executed. Now I can say, probably for most of us, the downside of anything that we do in terms of success or failure are probably never that severe. So take the chance, attempt what you're trying to do, and it's okay if you fail. Thanks for listening.